Hello and welcome to Empire of the Cop Insider. As ever, I have the lovely Neil Jones here with me today, and I'll be your host, Farrell Keeling, as we go through that latest win over Brentford and the consequences stemming from it. It's a big 4-1 win against Brentford, an important win given the last two visits to the EOTK Community Stadium. And whilst we're on that, I do kind of want to touch on the media narrative that stemmed from certain parts and outlets. Because, I mean, the length of time that was being discussed since Liverpool last got the league, when we were talking, what was it, sort of 3 league fixtures, but they were going on about sort of the, was it 1947 or something like that, that was sort of banging on about since our sort of last league win, but it's been like we played
1938.
38, there you go. But you look at the figures, you think, well, okay, you're thinking, you're referring to 20 games or something, but there's only in actuality sort of 3 games sort of separating us from that point. It just seems a bit over the top, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think, but they're both obviously very recent memories, aren't they? The 2 games, and they're both under Jurgen Klopp. And Liverpool conceded 3 goals, and they don't often concede 3 goals in a game. Less so, twice in a row against the same team and not a top team. So I think it was fair that people would look at the fixture as a potential one where Liverpool could slip up. I think Jurgen even said it on Friday in his press conference. He said, I think Manchester City and Arsenal fans will look at this weekend and think this is the one where Liverpool could drop points. As it turned out, they didn't, and it was City who dropped points, in a fixture that maybe a lot of people thought they would win quite comfortably. I thought it was a good performance for Liverpool. I thought it was a real professional performance, a performance that had the hallmarks of a team that's ready to really compete and to potentially win things. They're not the only team that will go to Brentford and win, but the way that they did it and the way that they held up and the clinical nature of the finishing and the fact that they were able to, beat Brentford at their own game at times with direct play and dangerous crosses and long balls over the top and things like that. I think that really, really bodes well for them. And I know there's some negatives that we'll come on and talk about, but overall, you can't look at anything from Saturday in terms of the results without sort of giving Liverpool an awful lot of credit.
No, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned the negatives. We'll start with the positives first. Give us a bit of a buffer. I'm going to start with Darwin Nunez's goal because my goodness, that is worth watching on repeat and repeat. Credit to Jota for the initial header that sort of sets him up in the path, and it's just unadulterated brilliance from our sort of main man up front. I mean, you sort of looking at it, you say he can go for the easy option, he can play Jota in, he can round the keeper, he can slot it in. There's so many options sort of that he could go for, but that's his thought process, and he's plenty of time to think about it. And there's been constant criticism, I think, with Nunez this season that when he has the time to think, he almost sort of struggles. Then he's more sort of an instinctive player, but the fact he does sort of pull that off, it's absolutely wild with the game level.
Yeah, it's wild. You're right. Just to even think about him, and just imagine he doesn't score. You've got Jota next to him wanting a square pass. You've obviously got every other option available in terms of going round the keeper. You've got just the standard finish that you would expect, where you'd open your body inside footed or drill it across the keeper. So there's so many options, and it says something about him as a character. And I think it's a positive. I think I saw Michael Owen's analysis of it yesterday and saying that he needs to change his mindset, because he shouldn't even be contemplating that kind of finish at 0-0. But I think that is just who he is. It's a little bit like the old cliche that people used to say about players who get red cards. You'd say you don't want to take that aggression out of the game. I don't think you can take that sort of, what's the wildness, I suppose, about Nunez, and it seems silly to call it wildness when it's such a composed finish, but it is wild that he would even consider it, because it was the last option I would have thought a centre forward would be thinking. Fair enough if the goalkeeper lies down and makes your mind up for you, but Flecken didn't even. He was stood up. He's chipped a goalkeeper from 4 or 5 yards away when he's been stood up. So it's an outrageously good piece of technique. It's an outrageously impressive piece of confidence, but it's also one that, it sort of speaks to his character, doesn't it? It speaks to Nunez that, whatever you expect from him, he doesn't often deliver it. I actually wrote in my stuff yesterday for Substack that I've been watching a lot of cricket recently, and there's a big debate in cricket about England and baseball and whether they have this mindset that the more tense a game situation goes, the more you should sort of attack it and really sort of do the sort of the front foot thing. Well, I think Darwin would fit in quite nicely in that cricket team, but sometimes it'll go wrong, sometimes it'll go right. It went right. It went right on Saturday. It was a brilliant finish. I think just as impressive as the finish, obviously the assist was great, but I think the anticipation from Nunez as well, as you see the ball goes up, he's the only one really that's on the move that anticipates that this might reach Jota and he might be able to guide it into my path. He sort of banks on the brilliance of Jota, gets his reward. So I think there's so much to admire about it, even if it's easy to imagine that it could have gone wrong, and we'd have been sitting here talking, going, "Oh, that chance Nunez missed it 0-0 where he tried to chip the keeper and the keeper just caught it or he put it over the bar." But I don't think. I think if you look at his numbers this season, 13 goals, 11 assists. I think we're seeing far more good than bad from Darwin this season.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, because I think what's certainly partly special about this side is they do each individually bank on each other's brilliance, and I think that's what makes it so successful. That's why we've seen so many sort of contributions from players who've come off the bench this season as well. I'm glad you mentioned the Michael Owen point, because I was thinking about it as well this morning. And I think I agree to an extent if it benefits his overall output, but then is it bad? You don't want to see him become fully sanitized. Do you know what I mean? It would be, you think even if he's sort of popping in 30 of these sorts of little dinks and curls, and you think, yeah, but I wouldn't mind seeing this.
There's a little comparison there with someone like Michael Owen and maybe Robbie Fowler when they came through. That I think I've seen it said a lot of times that sort of Owen wasn't as loved as Fowler by Liverpool fans, and I don't know whether that ever grated on Owen. I don't know whether there's been a little bit of back and forth between them, hasn't it? Over, I think Fowler made some comments about how good a striker he was in comparison to Owen. But I think for me, and it's my era, so I can talk about this really sort of personally. But for me, the thing about Fowler is, he would do things that you would want to try in the playground, where you would want to flick it through someone's legs and dink the goalkeeper, or flick it over your own head and volley it on your left foot, or whatever it was. He would score a lot of goals, but spectacular goals as well, and imaginative goals. Owen was amazing, but he did have one absolutely amazing attribute, which was he was lightning quick when he was young, and he was a really good finisher as well. He was cold, and he was clinical, and he was quite modern in the way that he did it. It was about sort of his positioning, and just sort of not really asking, and not really doing anything out of the ordinary. He was just getting into the right positions and putting the ball away, and he was brilliant at it. A little bit like Ian Rush, he's ruthless in that sense. But I think it's harder to sort of absolutely fall in love with that kind of player. It's a little bit like Mbappe and Haaland a little bit now. I think everyone appreciates that those two are unbelievable players. But I think if you asked everyone, who would you rather play like? Who would I rather be as a player? I'd rather be Mbappe and have his armory than Haaland. But it doesn't mean that one's more successful or less successful. And I think Nunez is in that. I think he can be a player who gets an awful lot of goals, and he's getting enough goals. I think at the moment he could get more, but he's getting a fair few. But I think he'll always have that element of, but he'll score some absolute crackers as well. He'll score, volleys. He'll score overhead kicks and great headers. And I probably wouldn't have imagined he'd score one like he scored on Saturday, but he's shown there that he's got that kind of mentality as well. That if you think you know him, if you think you've got him sussed, you haven't.
No, absolutely. I think it's worth sort of bearing in mind sort of the other performances that we sort of did see in the game. I thought Watira Endo in particular was fantastic. It's nice sort of scrolling down sort of Twitter and seeing some sort of really positive kind of commentary, and I think that's probably some of the best. I think I saw someone tweet that it was one of the best pieces of business Liverpool done in years, and I think for the money you'd have to agree, because you're looking at that in the summer and thinking it's just the kind of signing we need. But he's in his 30s. Where's this going to go? But in terms of even just how he uses his body on the pitch, sometimes you look at players and they have the height and they have the physicality, but they don't really use it that well, where he is using absolutely every tool in his locker to the best of his abilities. He's some player, Waturo.
Yeah, he's really good. I thought after the first 15 minutes, when Brentford had a bit of joy, and obviously they played with the two forwards, and it felt like Mopé and Tony were linking up relatively well with what little possession Brentford got. They were using it quite well, but it did feel like Liverpool figured it out, and I think a key to that was Endo in terms of splitting in between the two Brentford forwards to receive the ball, and then more often than not, actually, I mean, he's really good at the sort of the standard bounce pass, either back to a centre back or out to the full back. But he also has that real ability to turn and play a forward pass into the next line, if you like, into maybe a McAllister or into whoever's on the pitch, a Salah or a Jota. So he's really got that ability as well on the ball. But I think off it, you can see he's a teammate. That's the way I would describe him. He's an excellent teammate. He's always there to back up whoever's pressing the ball. He's always there to, if the ball goes long, he goes and wins it. If he's involved in the second goal, isn't it? He wins the header off the long goal kick. He's just a very good all-round player, and I've often complained about Liverpool. If I've had a complaint at times about Liverpool under Fenway, and maybe even before that, is that sometimes they don't do these kind of signings, these kind of ones where, okay, there might not be 5 years or 7 years of incredible sort of value in the player, but it's a player that it improves your squad straight away. And I look around the Premier League, and a lot of clubs have these kind of midfield players that you go, well, Christian Norgard, for example, or in the past, they've had players like Luka Milivojevic at Crystal Palace, where you've gone, they're solid players, then they're all right players, Liverpool never tend to have those kind of players, if you know what I mean. They don't have those ones that you go, well, they're not unbelievable, they're not spectacular players. They either have the sort of the up and coming stars, or they have the sort of established stars, or they have the ones that the sort of real projects, if you like. This was just a sign. It was like, well, we need a midfielder who can do this, this, and this. Who's available? Okay, it's him. He's 30. Get him in. He's not going to cost the earth. He's got the right mentality, and he can play as well. So a very, very shrewd sign, especially when you compare, he was essentially signed, wasn't he, because Liverpool couldn't get Romeo Lavia. Well, look at the output that have come from those two for different reasons, obviously, but Liverpool could well have been in a position where they've spent 60 million on Romeo Lavia, and they haven't been able to put him on the pitch, or they've been able to put him on the pitch, but not be able to get any level of consistency from him because he's so young. So the levels he's managed to get out of Endo, certainly in the last 3-4 months, have been outstanding. And again, I thought he was one of the best players on the pitch on Saturday for sure.
Absolutely. No, I think we do have to finally touch the sort of negatives of the game. And obviously the one that sort of stands out, and certainly one that Jurgen sort of mentions after when he's discussing his sort of mixed emotions after the 4-1 win, is of course the double injury, which seems a little harsh, I have to say, for Liverpool. But I mean, it's one of those where you can't really avoid it, isn't it? You're thinking it's Norgard, isn't it, that falls on Jota's knee, and you're thinking, he's 6'3", 6'4". Every kilogram of his weight on Jota's knee, it's not a malicious challenge. It's just pure bad fortune at that point. And Curtis just sadly can't continue. He's the kind of player who would just play through a bit of pain, to get through the 90 minutes. I think what's comforting is the fact that you look at the players that do come on. And I thought Gravenberch, who came on sort of 33 minutes to go later on in the game, was absolutely brilliant. To be fair, I think he statistically, so he won most of he won the most duels on the pitch of the Liverpool players. Useful with his passing, 31 out of 38. Liverpool's depth continues to be challenged, and players continue to deliver. I mean, we look at Conor Bradley, who we've spoken about, with so much praise, and rightly so. But I think there comes a point where Jurgen's got to be looking at this and thinking, well, I need these players, as brilliant as the lads are on the bench. You can look at Harvey Elliott, his virtues, you can talk about all day, Conor Bradley, Ryan Gravenberch. But you need this, especially someone like Jota, who's just been such a central figure, especially whilst we've not had Salah through the injury, through the African Cup of Nations. I mean, how do you look at this sort of going through? Are you sort of more optimistic about the squad, or is this sort of a real concern?
Well, no, I mean, there's no point being concerned because it hasn't happened yet. I do think there's a tendency among Liverpool fans to write things off before they've happened, and so that's it. I saw a few people saying, "Oh, that'll be a costly 3 points." It might be come the end of the season, and they'll have their moment, but it's still 3 points away at Brentford, and I think a lot of people. No one would swap the 3 points for the 2 players back fit and a 2-0 defeat. So it's massively unfortunate. At the same time, obviously, Salah comes back and immediately looks sharp. Like you say, Gravenberch comes on. And of course, he's got a bit to prove, I think, at Liverpool, but that's a good start. So can he build on that? You've got the ability to lay down the challenge to him. You've obviously got your left backs situation, your right back situation is a little bit better now, obviously with the 2 left backs back and Gomez able to be with Bradley. So it's sort of taking pieces out and putting pieces in a little bit at the moment. I think the 2 players that did get injured, I think they will be big misses because of the style of play that they have and the tactical sort of importance to the team. Jota's obviously one of those players that he influences the game, in the right way. He gets into the scoring areas, but he's also a fighter, and he takes the fight to other teams. I don't think he's ever cowed by a physical challenge or an away game or a tense atmosphere. Curtis is obviously really good for the balance of the team, so they will definitely be missed. But Liverpool have shown all season. We how many times we said it? I mean, look, Friday before the game, people said, "Oh God, Alisson's out." Well, Kelleher played really well, so that's okay. People said Trent's got injured, or never going to be able to cope. Conor Bradley steps in, and you go, "Oh, well, okay, looks all right." To the point where when Trent came back, people were saying, "Actually, I don't think he comes straight back in." We've seen it at the start of the season with Joel Matip getting injured. Gerald Kwanzaa managed to step in, so I don't have any doubts about the capability of Liverpool squad of handling these injuries. But you would want, obviously, the best possible news first and foremost from Jota and Jones, and I don't necessarily think it'll be great news on Jota in particular. And you want to avoid too many more, because obviously there comes a point when you can't take any more. But I don't think Liverpool are there yet. I don't think Liverpool are at the stage where it's like, oh, they just can't get through this. I think there might be some tough games ahead, and I'm looking at the final next weekend and thinking that's a really tough pick in midfield if Curtis is out, because it's obviously your natural. Gravenberch would be the natural replacement, but he's obviously not sort of done it for 90 minutes in a huge game yet. Elliott would be an option, but then you'd be having sort of 3 really small in stature midfield players against a team like Chelsea. That would be a risk. So I think there are some difficult selections coming up, and there might be some sort of mix and match going on, and there might be some pain to come in games where Liverpool have got to ride storms. But I don't think you can sort of have anything other than a fair amount of faith in these replacements coming in, because there's been so many of them who've done the job this season. There's 20 goals from subs this season, I think it was. So there's plenty of quality to come in and cope. It's just a shame for the players involved that they've been the ones who've got what look like at least significant injuries. In the case of obviously Trent out for a few weeks. Szoboszlai looks like he's going to be touch and go for the final. Probably not. We don't know about Alisson, but Jones and Jota both look like they're injuries that are not going to be a week or two. I think Jota's could be a good while.
I suppose, as you've touched on, ultimately we come away with the 3 points. This is a season of players writing stories, which only added by the fact that Jurgen's leaving this summer. Liverpool are in all the 4 competitions still that they're playing for. The City result obviously happens, and you look at the table and think, my God, even if City win their game in hand, Liverpool top of the table. But I mean, we're only 25 games into the season. There's still a long way to go. But even seeing that at this stage, I remember the reaction when it was, City. I think we lost points somewhere, and City obviously had the 2 games in hand. Everyone's going, they only need to win those in their head. But there are twists and turns around the corner. I think there was a time, of course, when everyone had dismissed Arsenal out at hand, and now they're certainly in a position where it's looking very tight at the top of the table. But Liverpool are writing story here. What I do want to touch on, certainly before we end this chat, is, of course, we spoke last time about the obvious front runner to potentially replace Jurgen Klopp in Xabi Alonso. But I wanted to bring up some other names that have been linked with and sort of discuss their virtues. So obviously we've seen recently the Portuguese top flight has become a major front for potential candidates, chiefly in Ruben Amorim at Sporting Lisbon and Benfica's Roger Schmidt. I'll start off with Ruben first, the younger of the three I'm going to touch upon. 39 years of age, so you think plenty of fuel in the tank for a young coach. Had a pretty sort of interesting managerial career, winning Sporting's first league title in 19 years, promoting young players to the squad who've gone on to make a big impact, including Liverpool-linked Gonçalo Inácio, Mateus Nunez, who obviously now plays for Manchester City, won the cup with them the next season, disappointment the season after, but now again they're engaging in a title challenge against Benfica, described as a pragmatic manager, good communication skills, tactical flexibility. I suppose the question is really at this point, how much will sort of personality win out over tactical style? Because we spoke about it again, last week to an important degree. It's not just about whether you're tactically astute or pragmatic. You need to fit the bill specifically as a Liverpool manager. That's quite an important thing.
Oh yeah, I think it's the biggest thing, because whoever's comes in has already got a job on their hands, and not necessarily that they won't be welcomed or that they won't be sort of popular with fans, but that they're replacing someone who was universally popular among Liverpool fans. They're replacing everyone's hero. They will be. So personality is huge. You couldn't bring in. And I'm just thinking of like Manuel Pellegrini, for example, who's at one point was obviously a big manager. You couldn't have a character like him who doesn't really engage with fans. He doesn't really display much passion. He doesn't really have a great grasp of sort of language around English football. I don't think that would work. I think they would be on the back foot from the word go. So personality is a big thing, of course, talent and ability. I think you mentioned Ruben Amorim, 39. I think Brendan Rodgers he might have been 39 when he took the Liverpool job. So there is form for Liverpool putting a young manager in there. And I think it is a young manager's job personally. Just with the squad, with the sort of the challenge that there is, obviously with the amount of sort of emotion that comes with managing Liverpool, especially if it's a Liverpool that's up at the top end of the table and competing for the big honours. So I think a young person, relatively young, it's not wrong with being 39, by the way. I am myself. would be advisable. I wouldn't see a sort of an aging veteran sort of doing this job. Certainly not for the long term. So he's got a good record. The question would be sort of how immediately managing in the Portuguese league transfers to managing in the Premier League, and we see players coming across, and it's seen as a good breeding ground for top players, the Portuguese league. But for top managers, is the challenge the same? Is the level of the diversity of the challenge really? Sport Lisbon, Benfica and Porto, even in their worst seasons, are expected to win pretty much every game and have a fair chance of winning most games. So is that ample preparation for a job at Liverpool, where they are going to be expected to compete with Manchester City on a weekly basis, when they're going to be expected to be one of the leaders in the Champions League betting? Maybe, but it would be a question I would ask. I would say that somewhere like the Bundesliga, somewhere like the lower reaches of the Premier League, potentially would be a better gauge. But he's been there a while. He's done a good job, so you can't argue with his credentials to potentially get a shot at another job in the near future.
I think that's the thing that you touched upon quite well. You look at sort of Alonso, and you sort of think, well, Leverkusen challenging Munich for the title when Leverkusen have never won the Bundesliga, and their last trophy came in 1994, I want to say. That is significant in whatever way you look at it, even if you factor in the fact that Munich's form and performances have kind of curtailed in sort of recent weeks. Tuchel's struggling. You still very much expect Munich, with their resources, certainly the players they've got at their disposal, to be winning the league title. They have won the league title regularly. This would be quite... Well, certainly will be considered by the Munich board quite the failure on Tuchel's part if he retain the growth. It is significant. But as you pointed out as well, we expect the players that come from the Portuguese top flight to potentially deliver in the Premier League. So to an extent, we do have to ask ourselves if it is also translatable for the managers. I mean, you mentioned Schmidt. He's obviously at the other end of the scale in terms of age. He's 56 years of age. He's the same age as Jurgen, really. A bit of a journeyman manager, also managed at Leverkusen as well, did reasonably well, got Champions League qualification for them, won a Dutch Cup with PSV against Ajax. He's now at Benfica. He's won the title with them already, had an unbeaten run for 29 games, breaking Portuguese records for consecutive wins in the Champions League without losing. First Portuguese team to reach the quarterfinals twice in a row. These are also quite significant achievements, and it's certainly for, we discussed this again last week, for a Liverpool manager. Success in Europe is paramount. We want that, we thrive on that, we need it. But I suppose it's the age that bothers me. It is the age. And it's the same thing we have with Postecoglou to a certain degree. I do wonder, even though maybe the personality might be the right fit, the age bothers me. I just think, as you say, this is a young manager's job to a certain degree. At least thinking, if you do 45, around that sort of age, you think, okay, fine. But you think, can you go for another 8 years in one of the most emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically draining jobs in world football? Can you do that? And I just wonder.
Yeah, I think also, I think his record isn't particularly impressive. As a 56-year-old manager, you mentioned obviously there, he won the Bundesliga, the Austrian Bundesliga with Salzburg. It's like, well, okay, I think Jesse Marsch won that. Yeah. You win the league title with Benfica. Listen, it's not to downplay someone's achievement of doing it, but it doesn't elevate you by winning the. If you win the Portuguese league with Benfica, I don't go, wow, that's some achievement. It's you may as well win the Scottish league with Celtic. I think a lot of Benfica's success, to me, doesn't come from the coach or necessarily. I mean, obviously the coach is important, but a lot of Benfica's success comes from the people who do the work, either in recruitment, bringing in South American players at the right time, or in the youth development system. That's Benfica's success for me. It's not a coach's club where I look at it and go, a head coach's club where I go, wow, he's got this group of players doing unbelievable things with, how's he managed that? I look at the talent that they produce and I think, yeah, that's the success of Benfica. So I would not look at a manager of a club like that, and that's me. That's my personal sort of opinion on it. But I would not look at a manager like that and go, wow, the job he's doing there is ample preparation for Liverpool. For me, it's not. The job of Liverpool is you have to create a team that is able to play against the best club team in the world and is able to compete over 38 games against the best club team in the world, in the toughest league in the world as well. So, that is a narrow field of coaches that can do that. For me, I look at who's the coaches that have been able to do it. Okay, Jurgen Klopp's been able to do it. How did he do it? Okay, well, he took on the biggest club, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and by far the biggest club in Germany. He did that, and he did it through channeling the fan base, through playing football with energy, bringing in great players, creating great players, bringing in players and turning them into great players through his coaching and through his man management. I look at Mikel Arteta now doing it, and whether he eventually manages to do it, but he's at least put himself in the conversation as being someone to rival City. How's he done it? He's done it through basically a complete sort of obsession with coaching. That he's the Guardiola sort of, he's the model, isn't it? So for me, Liverpool are going to have to make a decision on that, at one of those two. For me, I think it's going to have to be the sort of the real emotional driver, or the coaching genius, if you like. And I think there's a possibility. The more you see it, the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more you read, there's a possibility that Xabi Alonso falls in both of those categories. I don't see a 56-year-old Roger Schmidt with his sort of history in China and Austria and Portugal, as impressive as a manager and a person as he may well be. I don't see him as being the sort of person who is going to inspire the next great Liverpool team. I just can't see it.
I think certainly whilst we sort of talk about Postecoglou, whilst he may be the superior fit in terms of personality, again, I think, one, you've got to deal with Daniel Levy, who's...
Sorry, Postecoglou, yeah.
Postecoglou, yeah. You've got to deal with Daniel Levy, who has history for, he's going to make sure that Liverpool would have to move heaven and earth to get him anywhere near Anfield. Again, 58 years of age, so 2 years older already than Jurgen. So questions again over the sort of length of time. But I mean, where do you stand on that one? Because I look at those two and I just think not going to happen.
Who are the two? Sorry, Roger Schmidt and Postecoglou.
You see the links not going to happen.
Yeah, I think obviously Postecoglou is a little bit of an easier link with the Liverpool fan connection, isn't it? And look, he has done a good job at Spurs. I think it's been a little bit overplayed. I think it's been a little bit overplayed, the job he's done at Spurs, personally. But he has done a good job, in terms of imprinting himself on the team. He's created an atmosphere, hasn't he, that's a lot more positive around Spurs that we've seen we've seen sort of more renowned managers really sort of bring the mood down at that club, haven't we? And he's done the opposite. He's really got them sort of enjoying themselves again, which is a testament to him. You're right. I don't see it. I don't see Liverpool sort of wanting to go down that kind of negotiating route with a club like Spurs, and obviously the money they would have to pay and the messing about that they would have to do probably to get even Spurs to pick up the phone. And yeah, again, like I say, I think it's a young manager's job. I do. When your manager, who is known for his energy, is saying that he's running out of energy, I think you have to listen to that and you have to say, okay, what does that require? It might need someone fresh into the job, into football. It might need someone that's not, become cynical by years of failures or years of, press conferences and criticism and traveling and all those things. It might need that, and I know I keep coming back to it, but all signs do just point towards one or two managers, don't they? And I think Xabi is by far the standout candidate. I think Jurgen said it himself. I think he used that phrase. He said in the next generation of managers, he's clearly the standout. Whether Liverpool can get him or not, that's the next question. But for me, I think it's a no-brainer that they would try.
Let's come back to Alonso, because everyone wants to come back to Alonso for very, very good reason. I think sometimes you look at sort of neutral commentators are going to say, well, it's because he's an ex-Liverpool midfielder, but it's so much more than that. That's just merely the cherry on the cake. I think the last thing I kind of want to discuss is really there is a world, and I don't want to consider it, where Liverpool don't get Xabi Alonso.
Yeah.
And that would be a real disappointment for many of us, for many reasons. I suppose I don't want to fall into that trap of saying it's Alonso or bust. It's Alonso or the collapse of Liverpool Football Club, because Liverpool Football Club will go on. You know what I mean? We do find a reason to go on. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world, though it will probably feel like it for a short time if we miss an appointment. Liverpool can still make the right decision. There are still candidates out there, some who we might not have even heard of yet, and bringing a man that the fans can get behind and crucially can lead a team to silverware. We mentioned Ruben Amorim. Again, there are questions over whether he could make that adaptation to the Premier League instantly, or whether he sort of needs another sort of major club role as a sort of bridge between the two. But where do you stand on this? I think, are you optimistic that Liverpool will still find the right fit, even if for whatever reason, if Alonso chooses to stay, as Leverkusen's sporting director Simon Rolfs has claimed he will, or he gets snapped up bizarrely by Barcelona or something wild like that?
Yeah. I think obviously we talk about timing, didn't we, with Alonso, and that was the one thing for me, and I think it's even more stark now. I think almost that even if it doesn't happen this summer, as in Alonso going somewhere else, at some point Bayern Munich, Chelsea, Manchester United, Manchester City, Real Madrid, I said Bayern Munich, I'm like Paris Saint-Germain. They're all going to be looking for a new manager, and we're saying this, about Liverpool. There aren't many out there. That goes for it. That goes for all clubs. There's no managers beyond Guardiola probably that are, I would say, and probably maybe Arteta, but maybe that's just because of Premier League element. There's no managers out there that I'm saying are untouchable from a Liverpool point of view that Liverpool couldn't get. It's just that we don't know if they're any good or they're good enough. That's the managerial field at the moment. It's not packed with sort of obvious candidates for all these top jobs. It's packed for maybe candidates and play. People like Amorim, like Roberto De Serbi, like Xabi Alonso. There's others obviously that are coming through in Italy and a few in the Premier League with Gary O'Neill and people like that who are doing good jobs. Thomas Frank. But there's none that you sort of look and go, well, Barcelona will take him, Real Madrid will take him. They're all in the sort of same very small pool a little bit, and that's why I think for Liverpool, that's why they should be, for me, right in there now, saying, right, we need to get this done before everyone else sort of needs to do the same thing as we're doing at the moment. Because, like you say, if you don't get him now, it's easy to imagine Alonso at Real Madrid. It's easy to imagine him at Bayern Munich. I mean, look, Tuchel's probably not going to survive. He might not survive this season, but he certainly isn't going to survive, I don't think, the summer. So there's already sort of, wolves gathering a little bit. So for me, I think Liverpool needs to be acting fast. I take your point on, a little bit like Bellingham, I suppose, isn't there, as a player where it's like, it feels like whoever comes in. But then, while we would have all loved Bellingham, I don't think people are too, it hasn't felt like we spent this year sort of going, oh God, we didn't get Bellingham, did it? It sort of was a couple of weeks in the transfer window where everyone was disappointed, but once the sort of the football started and we saw what was being built and what the players who had come in were like, people start to get behind the alternative, don't they? It would probably feel like that until Liverpool came back to training and started playing a few games and having a few press conferences. If they came back with a manager who wasn't Alonso and who was, let's say they came back with Roger Smith, it might feel a little bit underwhelming or a little bit sort of, I'm not sure about that. But if they come and start doing the job well, then it'll be easily forgotten.
I suppose that's the only thing when it comes to the players, isn't it? You think, well, you miss out on Bellingham. It's not the end of the world. There's not the case where you're like, oh, there's only 2 or 3 midfielders.
And I suppose the other thing is, I would say is, FSG. It's been a while since they've had to do it, but the last appointment they made, they got it right, didn't they? They did the right thing. They got Klopp a little bit like that at a time when probably there was an idea that we better get this guy because in 3 months' time he's probably going to be a manager of someone else. I think the time before that with Rodgers, they took a gamble on a young manager, but Liverpool were a different club at that point. They needed someone to sort of, learn on the job a little bit like they were doing as owners and as the club was doing it. It wasn't the sort of, it wasn't among the European established elite at that time, in terms of the last 5 or 6 years before that, and they nearly got really big results from it, didn't they? Rodgers, I know it ended poorly for him, but he did have 2 seasons really where he started to build something really good at Liverpool and very nearly won the title. So their appointments have been decent. But Dalglish was the one obviously that they were forced into really early on in their tenure, but he actually won them a trophy, and he did have the effect that he was brought in to do. He was brought in to stabilise and to sort of reunite a little bit, and he did that. So the appointments they've made, different ones and in different eras and for different reasons, they haven't really. I don't think they've made a bad one yet in that sense. So with that, even though it's like you say, it's nearly 9 years since they made the last one, you can still have a degree of faith that okay, they'll at least come to a considered decision. It won't just be a sort of, oh God, get someone in quick, before pre-season starts. It will be something that there will be a thought process behind it. There will be a plan behind it, and I think that does maybe give you a little bit of reason for faith in the sort of in the process. You know, even if it maybe isn't Alonso, or it isn't the manager that you wanted, or the manager you think Liverpool should have picked, I think you can still have a little bit of faith in that it's a decision that's been made with, you know, the right intentions.
Absolutely.
In a difficult situation as well, because they didn't expect to be in this position. They didn't want to be in this position. I'm pretty sure they'd have loved to extend Jurgen's contract a bit further. Yeah, they'll have to try and make the best of a tough situation, of course.
I think there's been a lot said as well of the process, because, you know, we've seen Athletic reports on this discussing that, you know, the priority will be a sporting director first, who will then have input on the managerial selection. I think plenty have sort of expressed a bit of concern that, well, you know, we still don't have a sporting director. The Sharks are beginning to circle around Alonso. But I kind of think, well, I don't see a world in which Liverpool aren't at least engaging in some form of communication, some kind of conversation with Alonso and his sort of representatives.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe it's going to be a sporting director and then we'll start talking to Alonso, because by that point,
no.
You've already invited the Sharks in.
And you've already got to. Liverpool will already be doing some sort of diligence, whether it's scouting, whether it's agents, or for signings in the summer. They'll be looking at, and what's the first question an agent's going to ask at the negotiating table? He's not going to say what's my wages or where am I going to play. Who's the manager? You can't. Football's a very small world. It's a huge game and sport and industry, but it's a very small world. Everyone knows everything. Everyone thinks they know everything. So there will be a lot of rumours going around the agency circles, and, you know, there'll be a lot of people looking for clarification. They'll be looking at opportunities. Look, you know, okay, if that manager's going in there, my player might be ideal for them, or, you know, he gets on well with him, or vice versa. So there will be a lot of, you know, I don't see it being at Liverpool, right, going, right, we've got this guy in, sporting director, who do you fancy as our next manager? They will already be well down that track. They've had a lot of time to do it. They've had since November to be thinking about this. That's all. I'm pretty sure those two elements will be all they would have been thinking about in that period. And if not, then they haven't been doing their job.
Well, it seems a nice sort of optimistic note to end this latest episode of Empire of the Kop Insider. It's a 4-1 win for Liverpool over Brentford at the cost of 2 key players. But Liverpool's squad, Liverpool's depth keeps on providing. And that's what I'm going to be holding on to for the coming weeks. Neil, it's been a pleasure as always to have you on. And of course, everyone catching online with covering Liverpool at your Substack on neilj.substack.com, and of course you're on Twitter, or X as is currently known, at Neil Jones Goal. We'll of course be posting this conversation on our own channels on YouTube and our own Substack at empireofthekop.substack.com. But otherwise, this has been the lovely Neil Jones covering Liverpool. I've been your host, Val Keeling. Thanks for watching Empire of the Kop Insider, and take care.